quicker. And that's what happened today. We'll get into it, obviously, in our knee-jerk reactions here. You can leave a comment on our Facebook page or on our YouTube channel to let us know your reaction to today's game, and be sure to discuss it with us as we roll along. But as always, I'll have 5 takeaways. I'll flash them up here on the screen. If you're listening on the podcast afterwards, I'll make sure I read exactly what it is. Don't worry. We're still in the radio medium essentially, and the audio-only folks are the folks that got us here, right? And so 5 takeaways from this game mainly, and you can leave us yours in the comments if you so choose. But let's start out. I mean, this is it right here. Too many mistakes. Mizzou had a few. It had a few too many. Again, you could have afforded a few, but you can't keep giving Alabama freebies. It happened twice on the opening drive, twice by Zion Young. I really do think, I wonder what this game looks like. Even though it was very early on in the contest, I wonder what it looks like if Zion Young doesn't commit that unsportsmanlike penalty to essentially wipe out 3rd and 15 and give Alabama a first down through no success of their own. Like, that could have been a huge starting boost for this defense that didn't get off to the best start. Now, we'll get into how they actually did, in my estimation, a little bit later on, but you could have had you could have put together the perfect blueprint for how to upset Alabama if you just don't decide to go and taunt the opponent even the slightest bit. Look at the replays on our Twitter. You can go and check it out if you want. Like, yeah, it's weak. Our officials maybe a little too likely to throw these flags. Yeah, I think so. I think for the most part, let's let these kids play. But you know that this is how they officiate this. This is not the first time that Mizzou has had a taunting penalty this season. You know exactly what to expect from officials. You can't have moments like that. And we don't know what Zion Young said or anything like that, but he hovered over an opponent when he wasn't the guy that made the play. You can't do that. You just can't. So that was a huge mistake that early on you think, okay, that needs to be the only one. Like, you cannot have any more. Mizzou had a few more. They weren't necessarily in the form of penalties for the most part. Mizzou actually cleaned up the penalties very well after that first drive. They did get the targeting penalty on Marvin Burks. And I know folks are upset about that. Like, what? How do you play safety anymore? And you're not wrong. I know it is incredibly more difficult now to play that position. I thought by the letter of the law, yeah, it was targeting. It doesn't matter if it's helmet to helmet. If you hit the head or neck area of a defenseless player with your head, your elbow, your shoulder, your bicep, your forearm, pretty much anything, you're going to get called for it. It's in the rules. It's by the book. I think the right decision to uphold it. And it's unfortunate. Like, I don't know what to tell Marvin Burks on how he's supposed to play safety. I really don't know. That's a discussion for another time. It's been a long-standing discussion on targeting, but it was, I think, the right call if you're going to officiate the rules the way that they are written. So, I mean, you could call that a mistake. I'm not necessarily putting that in this category. I look more at the mistakes of the penalties that you can maybe control a little bit more, like the taunting, like the offsides. But really, other than that, Mizzou only 4 penalties today. They really well cleaned up that part of their game. Later on, though, I thought on offense, there were several instances where you could have been a little bit cleaner. Bo Prabula in a moment, I believe in the first quarter, where he's got a wide open Marquise Johnson. And I really don't know if it was him not seeing Marquise and deciding to throw it away because he was under duress, or if he did see Marquise and he threw it and it was just that bad of a misfire. I find both scenarios kind of hard to believe. So for me, it's either way, it's a mistake. And then you get to the ball security stuff. Mizzou was flirting with a turnover a couple times in the first half had a couple of fumbles that ultimately they recovered. So some guys that were not involved in the play saved their bacon there, or one of the fumbles in one instance, it went out of bounds and there wasn't a clear recovery inbounds by Alabama. So Mizzou was saved a little bit by that. But eventually the turnovers did happen, and Bo Prabula, I think it seemed on both plays there was some miscommunication. Certainly on the one with Coleman where he's still running up the field. He doesn't realize the ball is being thrown his way, and sure enough, there's a safety there waiting to catch it. And then on obviously the last play, don't put a ton on it, but you're trying to make a play. You're looking down the field. Again, it was kind of a situation where you don't see the ball and the receiver that far apart unless there's some sort of miscommunication, and it goes from there. So, look, take away any one of those that we described there, and I think Mizzou maybe makes this a different outcome. You never know. I mean, there were some defensive ones too. The 3rd and 24, you could maybe say, hey, is that a coaching mistake by making sure that you're not just in zone, you're playing prevent on 3rd and 24 so that they can get a big chunk of yards and think about going forward on 4th and 8 and Ty Simpson can make a big play. That you could maybe chalk up to being a mistake by the defensive coaching staff, potentially. Execution-wise, later on that drive, when on 4th and goal from about the 2, they lose a running back in coverage. They're unable to find him there, and that's the touchdown that ultimately seals it, makes Alabama go up 2 scores. And, yeah, I mean, all these things just sort of add up, and you get a Mizzou team that is scratching their head thinking, what happened? We were right there. But you take away any one of those, and Mizzou probably makes this a different outcome. And again, that goes back to what I was saying. You don't have to be mistake-free anymore to beat this Alabama team, but you can't continue to give them free instances to move the football or get a first down via penalty, allow them a bunch of space in the middle to momentum on offense, overthrows, miscues, miscommunication, things like that lead to turnovers. You just can't have very many of those when you go up against this team still, even when you're at home. So, Mizzou had the horses to stay in this game, obviously, but you can't get the finishing job if you make these types of mistakes. We haven't seen Mizzou do that a whole lot during fourth quarters over these last couple of years, but it happened today, and that's why the outcome was what it was. I think that's the main thing. And look, you're not discouraged too much by it. You know for sure that mistakes can be cleaned up, and if you have just a few more off the board in your next game, then you're probably winning and you're back on track. But down the stretch, this is the reality check for Mizzou that, look, the rest of your schedule is a meat grinder. You're not going to have any respite going forward. So it's got to be cleaned up immediately as Mizzou now heads out on the road for the first time all season long. All right, this was also kind of puzzling. We were wondering if Mizzou was down in this game, were they going to abandon the run at any point, or were they going to try to keep with it because that's what they do well. That's what they do best. And it seemed that in the third and fourth quarter, Mizzou went away from it. These were the numbers between the first half and the second half. Mizzou ran it 19 times in the first half for an average of 6.4 yards per carry. In the second half, 9 carries for 4.7 yards per attempt. Now, obviously, when you're climbing back into a game, when you're behind, you do have to throw some more. That's obvious. I don't know if Mizzou was really in the position for a good amount of the second half where they needed to just throw on every single play. I don't think they were quite there. And it was a little puzzling that they wouldn't turn to Ahmad Hardy as often as they did in the second half, which was not very often at all. Hardy finishes with 12 carries, 52 yards. He doesn't get in the end zone. He averages 4.3 yards a carry, which from what we have expected from Ahmad Hardy here recently, that's his lowest output on the season. Not surprising that it comes against Alabama, but that's what happened. But these were the third and fourth quarter carries. He had only 4 carries in the second half total. He had an 11-yard run, a 2-yard run, a 5-yard run, and a 1-yard run. Is that enough to give a guy like that, even when you're in a situation where you are trailing, but you're not trailing by 2 scores? They didn't trail by 2 scores until Alabama scored that touchdown with just over 3 minutes to go. So did you need to just shy away from running the football as immediately as Mizzou seemed to do? And I think it was mostly laid out in that possession where Mizzou, it was the one that ended in the fake punt. Mizzou, I'm going to find the drive here just to make sure I've got everything correct. But Mizzou had it with 9:19 to go. I believe they had just forced the missed field goal. And so they're only down 3 at that point with just over 9 minutes left. And they throw it 3 times. And they completed at least one of them, but it ended up in a 4th down play where they're 4 yards away and they decide to run the fake punt. First of all, if you trust your unit to run the fake punt with Jamal Roberts, why isn't Jamal Roberts just running it anyway in the offense? Jamal Roberts can be a game breaker for you. He had a long run in this game. It helped pace Mizzou in the first half to climb back into it. That's kind of where I come down on it, is if you're not getting to that sooner, then maybe you don't need to run the fake punt there. Or if you're going to run the fake punt, why not just run a play, right, on 4th and 4? At least make the defense think about whether or not you're going to run or pass in that situation. But I thought on several instances, there was even a 3rd and 2 first drive of the second half for Mizzou. I actually don't know if it was the first drive of the second half. It might have been the second drive, but they had a chance that obviously they got the sack fumble to score right as Alabama got it. So they used that to tie the game, and then they get it back with a chance to take the lead with the score tied. They started around the 10-yard line. Ahmad goes for a couple yards, then they get a completion to set up 3rd and 2, and then they throw it again. I figured that would be a case where you could give it to Ahmad Hardy, and he had been averaging, a good amount per carry to that point. Why not just give him a shot to get to the first down on the ground? I thought there was a good spot to do it there, but the drive that sticks out the most to me is that 4th quarter drive with about 9 minutes to go, and they throw it 3 times. You don't need to throw it 3 times when you got 9 minutes left and you're only down 3. You don't need to have that urgent need to throw the football. And I'm not saying that Bo Prabula was ineffective throwing the ball. He obviously wasn't great today, but you need to go back to what got you here, to this number 14 ranking, and it has been your run game. Now, they weren't as effective as they had been against their first 5 opponents. It wasn't Ahmad Hardy 100+ yards, great. It wasn't 7.5 yards a carry, great, like they've had in games past. But it at least was effective to where I don't think you needed to shy away from it. And we talked about the time of possession battle leading up to this game. I don't think Mizzou needed to win that battle. They obviously didn't. Alabama pretty well dominated in that department, and we'll get a little more into that. But for me, you could have at least tried to sustain a little more offense, a little more rhythm maybe for your offensive line to get into some of those run plays, especially late. I was a little surprised that Mizzou shied away from the run at the point that it did. I don't think they needed to abandon it. And by the time that they had given the ball to Alabama for a chance to score a game, well, then it was too late. You needed to throw after that. And give Bo Prabula credit, give Donovan Olubade credit. My gosh, what some big-time catches to at least give Mizzou a last gasp in this game when he hadn't really been targeted for a lot of the contest. He just shows up in some really clutch moments. But, yeah, it seemed a little off to me. I'm sure it seemed off to you as well, how it went for Mizzou trying to pace their offense when it maybe wasn't as humming as it was through the first 5 games. But I think that's something you could have expected. I don't think that means you have to make the all the way adjustment to say, no, we need to pass more. Like, I think you could have stuck with it a little bit longer in this game, especially since Alabama is a little bit better defending the pass than they are at defending the run. So, and look, Eli Drinkwitz didn't have a clear explanation of it afterwards, said he had to go back and look at things, and that's fair. I think he might see that they got away from it a little sooner than they would have wanted to stay in this game for as long as possible. So, or at least give themselves a better chance to take the lead in the fourth quarter like they had several chances to do. Like, they had 3 straight drives where they could have taken the lead. They were either tied or down 3, and they could have taken the lead with a touchdown on any of those drives. And on those drives, they went punt, interception, turnover on downs. The turnover on downs one is the one that sticks out to me. That was the one with the fake punt. Again, if you're going to run a fake punt, if you're going to go for it, just go for it. Like, get your offense out there. They have a better chance of picking it up than your punting unit does. So I thought that was a little bit off in this game. I don't think Mizzou should have shied away from it as quickly as they did in this contest. Now, this next one, the defense did what it could. No, they did not get off to the best start. Alabama's first 3 drives were an 11-play drive, a 10-play drive, and a 9-play drive. It went touchdown, field goal to open up the game. And that had a grand total of 185 yards gained through those first 3 drives. Not a great start, but after that, I thought Mizzou really did a nice job of holding Alabama's offense at bay for as well as their quarterback was playing today, and we're going to get to that too. Like, yeah, they were going to give up some big plays. Alabama was going to have some punches in them, people. Like, they do this. Their offense is also very darn good. Probably a better offense on the whole, at least for now, than Mizzou's is. They definitely have the edge at quarterback. And so that's going to happen time to time. They got excellent playmakers on the outside. They're going to make big plays. Like, you can be upset about the 3rd and 24 and the set that Mizzou was in defensively. And yeah, that's perfectly okay. I don't think you can be too upset about the 4th and 8 right afterwards. That's just an incredible throw and an incredible catch by 2 players that were highly touted going into college, and they're starting to show their potential now. I thought the defense actually played pretty well for the last 3 quarters of the game, essentially. Like, maybe 2.5 quarters. They finished out this game, I thought, very well, considering the opponents. They got 4 sacks today. After Alabama converted on each of their first 4 third down conversions, they only went 2 for 11 after that. Now, they were 3 of 3 on 4th down, but I thought still a very solid effort all around from Mizzou. And obviously they got the turnover to kind of the game a little bit more on the sack fumble right at the beginning of the half, and they give you that type of boost. So, and some of the sacks I don't even attribute to the pass rush. I attributed the first couple of sacks to the coverage. Like Ty Simpson had to hold it for quite a while. His offensive line couldn't hold up completely. Mizzou got home. They had enough time to get home, and they did so. I thought it was a fairly strong effort for the 2.5 quarters from Mizzou to keep them in the game. And they had to save the offense's butts a few times down the stretch to allow them to get into it. Like you mentioned, making the stop after the onside kick on the 3 downs where Mizzou's got 3 timeouts, and they stop them on 3 run plays. And they stop them to the point where Alabama maybe could have gone for it on 4th and 5 to try and ice the game, but they decided not to. Like, you forced them out of that situation. I actually was very impressed by how the defense adjusted and responded to what was happening out there. Now, look, a few moments in the second half, obviously you're leaving a little bit to be desired. The 3rd and 24 is the main one that you look back on and say, maybe make sure that it's not a 14-yard gain. Even a 10-yard gain is probably acceptable enough to force Alabama into a punt or maybe a long field goal. I don't know exactly what spot they were on the field, what would have been the better decision there. But for me, I chalk up the defense on the whole in this game as a positive. They held Alabama to their lowest passing total all season long, 200 yards. The one thing that was the equalizer for Alabama in this game, however, was running the football. And it's not even something that I fault Mizzou all that much for either, because they've been very, very good against the run all season. And they were still pretty good today, only gave up 125 rush yards. Jam Miller had 20 for 85, which isn't gaudy numbers, but it was enough to the point where, in past games, especially against Mizzou's Power 4 opponents, they just forced opponents to throw out every single running back play call from their playbook. Like, it just was not an effective play. Alabama was running with Miller effectively enough to where you probably weren't turning away from him at any point. And sure enough, he got 20 carries. Now, he did get knocked out of the game, unfortunately. Looked like he took a hard hit to the head going out of bounds and then went straight to the locker room. Obviously, hope he's okay. He played well today. But that was maybe the thing that allowed Alabama a little more margin of error, was that their running back plays were actually somewhat effective as opposed to not effective at all, which is what Mizzou's opponents were facing in the first 5 games that Mizzou had this season. Like, you just couldn't run against them at all. But Alabama did to a degree, not to an excellent degree. Take out the sacks, they averaged 3.8 yards per carry. That's meh. But it was enough to the point where it still kept them on schedule. They weren't necessarily behind the chains all that much. And if you let Ty Simpson operate in that realm, he's going to burn you. And so that was maybe what the defense couldn't necessarily make up for in that moment. But I still think, on the whole, they did what they could. They kept Mizzou in this game. Could they have shaved a few points off of Alabama's total today? Probably. But I put it more so on the offense for just being one step short of hanging in this game offensively to try and match Alabama's point total. I thought the most likely scenario was that we were going to see a lot of points. I don't know, 51, I can't remember where the total closed, but it obviously came very close because that's usually a pretty common number. But I still think the defense comes away with some positives to take away, and we'll see where they build it from there. But obviously, they'll say not good enough to win, but down the stretch, they gave Mizzou every chance that they could to hold Alabama out as much as possible, save for the one drive in the fourth quarter where Alabama went up 2 scores. But again, they're getting a short field after the turnover on downs too. So I think you also can understand that. Now, look, this is Alabama. Sometimes you just have to tip your cap. Ty Simpson was incredible. He was the best player on the field today. When you have the best player on the field, you're probably going to win in any given ball game. I know Mizzou fans really hoped that it was Ahmad Hardy. I think there was a chance that it could have been him today. And maybe if they give him a few more opportunities in the second half, he gets that chance. But to me, there was very little denying Ty Simpson of the game-breaking plays that he made. Did well on some scrambles. He finishes 23 of 31 for, again, 200 yards. It's not an excellent passing yardage number, but he was accurate. He threw 3 touchdowns. We talked about the 4th and 8 play. I just think that's an excellent play, guys. Toriano Pride had very good coverage, I thought, on that wideout, and he made a great catch along the sideline. It's going to happen, especially with a guy like Ty Simpson at quarterback, who is playing just about as well as anybody in the country at that position. Sometimes you just got to tip your cap. Look, Mizzou could have won this game with Simpson still being incredible. We talked about that. They made too many mistakes. But you also have to acknowledge that beating a guy like that is going to take a lot to overcome. But you shouldn't ignore that he was incredible, and he needed to be for Alabama to win this game. And for me, I still think the defense, when they look back at what happened, they'll see mistakes that they can be better at here and there. They'll nitpick every single play, every single third down that they gave up and be like, got to be better. But like Simpson is a tough quarterback to deal with. Just cycling through what Mizzou's going to be facing coming up later this year. They'll have John Mateer. They'll have Diego Pavia. Those Taylor Green's playing great. I don't know if I put him in this category, though. Those are maybe the only 2 quarterbacks that I say are at or maybe above Simpson's level of play at this point in time. So you find out what happened against this guy, and you're able to take that, correct the mistake, and see where it gets for these next few games. Because, look, he's burned everybody at this point. Burned Georgia. Obviously burned Vanderbilt. What Alabama is doing after that opening night loss to Florida State is still pretty incredible, folks. Like, they've beaten 3 top 20 opponents in a row. 2 of them were in the top 10, and or top 15, I should say, and both of those were on the road. And so sometimes you just have to acknowledge that they had the better player on the field than anyone else that Mizzou had at their disposal. It was an incredible job by Ty Simpson. He made every play. I was really impressed by the 4th and 1 play where he is reading, I believe, Khalil Jacobs, who was trying to chase him down, but you had a rollout to the right side on the bootleg. He's got a running back option if he needs it to pitch it forward. And right as Jacobs decided to make the decision, hey, I'm going to come after Simpson, make sure he doesn't get the first down, then it was perfect to Miller to make sure that it was a first down. And like, that just comes with some real moxie. I'm impressed by how well the decision-making was in those moments for a guy who's a first-year star to do what he was doing on the road against a very solid defense. Yeah, there were times where he was affected, and Mizzou's pass rush away several times against him. But this is why I thought it was important to get sacks and not even necessarily affect him as much as they did, force him into overthrows, underthrows, whatever it might have been. I thought it was going to be important to actually get the credit and take him behind the chains a little more often with some sacks. And obviously they got a fumble out of one of them, some big sacks on 3rd down to give yourself a chance defensively. So, again, I I don't fault a lot of what Mizzou's defense did, certainly in the second half. We can go back and talk about how they started, saying that it wasn't good enough, and absolutely say that. The 3rd and 24 also. But largely, I don't put a lot of this loss on what the defense did. I thought they did just about everything they could, and Ty Simpson was better. Just it happens, especially when you play a team like Alabama. So, all right, Mizzou lost this game. Now what? They have a loss. It's going to happen. Teams that make the college football playoff have losses, folks. Like you can still get in. The hopes are not gone for Mizzou. The schedule allows for them to make a run in the second half of the season and ultimately impress the committee enough to be worthy of an at-large bid. But now you've just lost, I think, about half of your margin for error. I think Mizzou can only get in with 2 losses maximum for this year's college football playoff. I just don't think they're a 9-3 for them is going to be enough. I don't think 9-3 will be enough for most teams. Maybe the ones with ultra tough schedules. Mizzou does have a tough schedule, but maybe not in the top 10 of the country, just quite. So I think you're still looking at a requisite 10 wins to put yourself in that mix squarely. And that's going to be difficult. This is by far the more difficult half of the season for Mizzou. You've got to win 5 out of 6 games against all SEC opponents. 4 of those games are on the road. And so that means for your road games, you have to win 3 of them, at least, at Auburn, at Vanderbilt, at Oklahoma, at Arkansas. 2 of those teams are ranked in the top 20 this week. One of them has a chance to topple Georgia today. I picked them to maybe do it. I don't know if they actually will. And then Arkansas is, a feisty team and a rivalry game. Maybe they're playing more inspired under Bobby Petrino once again, as crazy it is to say that. But those road games are going to be tough, and that's before we even talk about Mizzou hosting a top 5 Texas A&M team in November. And then hosting Mississippi State should be a win. You're better than them, but they have shown to be a prickly team also this season. This will be very difficult, especially if Mizzou plays the type of mistake game that they did today. It was just a few too many, and it wasn't good enough to beat Alabama. And it might not be good enough to beat Auburn next week, especially since you're on the road. It becomes even more magnified when you do things wrong because the crowd then gets amped up, and then you're more likely psychologically to maybe screw up the next play, right? And again, with the way that Mizzou went out on the road for the first time last year against Texas A&M, that's going to be in the back of every fan's mind. Like, if you come out like that, well, then, yeah, you could probably kiss a lot of this goodbye because it wouldn't take you out of the playoff conversation entirely. You'd still only have 2 losses, but how can you then project, if you're losing to Auburn next week, wins against Oklahoma and A&M and even Vanderbilt the very next week? They're possible. Are they easy to see? If you're unable to get next week's against Auburn, assuming that they take another loss today, it's going to be very hard to see. So, look, they're not gone. Everything is still on the table for Mizzou. As we mentioned at the Open, the preseason perception, I should say, of this Alabama game hasn't necessarily changed all that much. Mizzou went into it 5-0. If they get this win, that is not only icing, but it's cherries, it's toppings, it's everything on the cake for how the first half went. And now you have a clear shot to the college football playoff. If you lose it, yeah, maybe it's disappointing, but it's not a killer to your college football playoff hopes. I mean, I'm not trying to downplay today's loss. I know it felt awful in the moment, and Mizzou had every chance to get it. I'm not saying you shouldn't be disappointed, but to put it all in perspective, you still can wreak havoc against the rest of this schedule and make the CFP, but you're only afforded one loss the rest of the way. If you had to ask me, it's likely to come against Oklahoma. So that means you would have to get next week against Auburn, next week against Vanderbilt, come out of this 2-game road stretch unblemished, and then you've got to topple A&M when they come to your place after a bye week. That'll be tough. It's kind of why Mizzou might look back at this loss and think, man, we were right there. If you finish like 9-3 maybe, or 8 or something like that, and say, well, we were this close to getting that signature win. But it wasn't only that, it actually was a win that we could have foreseen really helping us towards this final goal. And if we get it, then we're afforded maybe a loss against A&M and Oklahoma down the road, and it doesn't absolutely bite us and leave us out. So now that you've got that loss, it's time for Mizzou to hit the most important stretch of their season, and they're not allowed very many stumbles going forward. I'll pick them to win right now at Auburn today based on what I've seen so far. Like, I'm not seeing a team that's lost or anything like that. They played hard today. They played fairly well on the defensive side, considering their opponents. You have some questions about what you did offensively. Maybe you go in and you realize that you've got to stick with the runner a little bit longer. Maybe game script will dictate that a little bit more. It's more of fine-tuning things on that the ball than anything else. But I still see a team that is very talented. It's certainly not discouraged by what this season can be. Obviously, the sentiment from the players that we heard post-game was that, look, yeah, everybody's really disappointed. Everybody's down because, man, we really wanted this. But there was still a lot of optimism from guys saying, look, this doesn't have to be the end. There can still be a light at the end of the tunnel where if we start stockpiling a few wins here soon, everything can be right on the table again. It's not off the table. Like, again, build up a couple wins on the road against Vanderbilt, and you'll be right back in the mix. And then you'll set up a huge matchup against A&M following a bye week. So you'll essentially get another shot at this situation right here. Can Mizzou build that stretch for themselves? That'll be the question going forward. So those are the takeaways, and thanks for sticking with us. Thanks for hanging out. Again, leave comments below on our YouTube channel and on Facebook, and we'll get to those, and you can let your voice be heard. You can also be sure to join us on Monday at 4 o'clock. Brendan, if you were watching him tweet through it during this game, his Wi-Fi over in his usual section was working a little bit better today, and you saw a few more thoughts in real time of how Brendan was taking this one. Maybe a little more back down to earth when we get to it on Monday at 4. But be sure to join us for that on the big show on KTGR. We'll be live here on YouTube and on Facebook as well for that. So hope you join us for it. Thanks for listening along and watching along with this week's knee-jerk reactions. And we'll see if Mizzou can bounce back the very next week on the road as they have their first road trip against the Auburn Tigers. Oh, by the way, I should mention, if you haven't heard yet, if you haven't seen our KTGR app or our website, ktgr.com, or if we just scrolled by on Facebook right here and you want to click on our profile, you'll see that we have an event set up. We are holding watch parties for every Mizzou road game this season, partnering with Yingling on that, and the Deuce Pub and Pit will be out at the Deuce for this weekend's game against Auburn. We'll be at the next weekend, or be at the Deuce for next weekend's game against Vanderbilt and the other 2 road games coming up in November. So be sure to join us for those. We'll be starting a little bit before game time, but there will be free flight by Yingling. That's pretty cool. While it lasts, it won't last forever, so be sure early and get a free flight by Yingling. We'll have great giveaways. You can win some Mizzou football and basketball tickets during all these watch parties. We'll have mainly football tickets for this first one. Yingling will have some giveaways. We'll have some KTGR t-shirts that you can win as well. And you can watch the game with us and enjoy some great food and drink from the Deuce. They'll have happy hour specials too that are running during the day. So be sure to join us at the Deuce Pub and Pit coming up on Saturday for Mizzou and Auburn. That'll be either 6 or 6:45. We're going to learn the game time later on tonight, I would imagine. So we'll get more concrete details on it very soon. So be sure to join us for that. We'll also have a knee-jerk reactions after that game, or at least two, once that's wrapped up. So be sure to stay tuned on this channel for reaction to each and every Mizzou game this season. Thanks for joining us today. Take care.